Honey, that's just how things are now. A woman at the feed store said that to a farmer's wife, looking at the floor instead of her face. She wasn't talking about weather, she was talking about poison. For 6 years, a sugar company had been dumping its waste on the edge of one family's land. Nobody fought it, nobody stopped it. The whole county had simply agreed to look away. But there was a girl on that farm who heard those words and did not look away. She was 16, and she was about to spend the next 2 years proving that everyone, the company, the neighbors, her own exhausted father, had gotten the math wrong. Elsie Ren had her grandfather's hands before she had anything else of his, broad-knuckled, sun-cracked, more useful than pretty. She wore boots taped at the toe because new ones were a want, not a need, and on the Ren farm you learned that difference early. She didn't talk much. People mistook that for shyness. It wasn't. She was a girl who listened twice before she spoke once, who noticed things, a fence wire pulled too tight, a calf favoring its left leg, a smell on the wind that didn't belong, before anyone else in the house did. She had also, by 16, stopped expecting adults to fix things. That wasn't bitterness, it was just data. Her grandfather used to say you could push a fence post into the bottomland by hand and watch it sprout by Sunday. That was the kind of soil this family had farmed for 3 generations. Soft, dark, generous. Then a man in a tucked-in shirt came one autumn afternoon and used the word temporary the way men like that always do, meaning nothing and everything at once. The sugar refinery's processing waste needed somewhere to go, and the Ren family's back 40 happened to sit downhill, downwind, and conveniently close. The piles grew. The grass along the fence line turned the color of weak tea. The well water took on a sourness Elsie's mother stopped mentioning because there was nothing to be done about it. Her father went to the company office 3 times. The first time he came home angry. The second time, quiet. The third time he didn't speak of it at all, and that silence moved into the house and sat down at the table with them, a permanent guest. 6 years of poison was no longer the real problem. The real problem was a 16-year-old girl watching her father shrink at his own kitchen table and deciding, somewhere quiet inside her, that she would not shrink the same way. Elsie watched her father get smaller that year, not in body, but in the way a man gets smaller when he's told often enough that his complaints don't matter. By the time Elsie was 16, the dumping ground had a name in the family's private language, the Black Mountain. It steamed in the early heat. It smelled like rot wearing the costume of molasses. The flies hung over the drainage ditch in slow spirals, and nothing grew anywhere near it. She stopped expecting the county to open that folder with their name on it. She stopped expecting the neighbors to say anything braver than, "That's just how things are now." What she didn't stop doing was walking the fence line every week, checking for breaks, the way her grandfather had taught her before he died. It was on one of those walks, late September, that she saw something that made her stop cold. In the oldest, most abandoned corner of the dump site, flattened by rain, half forgotten by the trucks, a single tomato plant stood taller and darker and heavier with fruit than anything in her mother's garden. Thriving. In poison. Alone. Nothing else in that field was alive. She stood there until the sun moved, and for the first time in 6 years, what she felt wasn't helplessness. It was a question. She didn't tell anyone. She went to the county library instead and asked the librarian for anything on composting, not because she had a plan, but because she had a question that wouldn't leave her alone. What she learned, reading at the kitchen table after chores for weeks on end, rearranged something in her. The cane waste poisoning her family's land wasn't garbage. It was unfinished. Raw sugarcane fiber is one of the most carbon-rich materials on Earth, but dumped without nitrogen, without air, without time, It does nothing but choke and starve the ground it touches. Add the right ratio, 30 parts carbon to 1 part nitrogen, and that same waste becomes humus, dark, sweet-smelling, alive. Farmers had an old name for it. Living fertilizer. She built her first pile in secret behind the equipment shed that October. 4 feet across, 3 feet high, layered the way the extension pamphlets described. For a week, nothing happened. She pressed her palm against it every morning and felt only cold, wet fiber. On the 9th day, it was warm. On the 11th, it was hot enough that the steel rod she pushed into its center came out almost too hot to hold. She stood in the frost-bitten morning air, laughing, a short, startled sound she hadn't meant to make. It did not stay easy. A cold front froze the outer layer solid in November. A wet snow drowned the core in December, and the smell that rose when she turned it made her stagger back with her sleeve over her face. The smell of microbes suffocating, not breathing. She rebuilt it. A boy at school saw her hauling manure one Saturday and told the whole class on Monday. For 2 weeks, someone's handwriting on her locker called her the Manure Girl. She didn't wipe it off. She thought about the tomato plant instead and kept turning the pile every Sunday, alone, while the rest of the county went to church. Her agriculture teacher, a quiet man who'd grown up on a dairy farm, set a taped-together copy of Sir Albert Howard's An Agricultural Testament on her desk without a word one day. "Read it when you can," he said, then, almost as an afterthought, "My barn's got space if you need it." She read it twice. She didn't ask for help yet. By March, the oldest pile had finished, dark, crumbling, smelling not of rot but of rain on a forest floor. She filled a coffee can with it and set it in front of her father at the kitchen table. "Fertilizer," she said, "from the back lot." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Something crossed his face she hadn't seen in 6 years. By June, her test plot, a tired, sandy quarter-acre that had grown nothing but weeds for 2 seasons, looked like something lifted out of her grandfather's old photographs. Corn waist-high. Tomato vines bowed under their own weight, bean rows that needed restaking twice. In September, her teacher ran soil tests across 3 plots, hers, the bottomland, and the dump site itself. Her plot had nearly 3 times the organic matter of the surrounding fields, and microbial activity higher than anything he'd measured in 23 years of teaching. What she'd built behind that shed, he told her parents quietly, was a complete organic fertilizer, built entirely from material the company had been paying to throw away. The company sent a man that October, younger, better suited, quieter voice than the last one. He asked if the Wrens might be open to a conversation about the materials on the back lot. Elsie answered the door. She didn't gloat. She'd imagined, in the worst months, exactly what she'd say if this moment ever came. And none of those speeches fit anymore. They felt too small for what had actually happened. "You can talk to my father," she said. "He's in the barn." It wasn't a courtroom victory. The company didn't collapse. Nobody lost a job in disgrace. The dump site was simply cleared, at the company's expense, once they understood, the way men like that eventually do, that the value of the thing had changed hands. The bottomland took 4 more years to fully heal. She worked it the same slow way her grandfather had taught her, season by season, until by the time she was 23, that soil was the richest within 50 miles. "Honey, that's just how things are now," a woman once said, looking at the floor. She was wrong. Things only stay the way they are while everyone agrees not to look closer. Elsie looked closer. And the ground her grandfather once said you could grow a fence post in, it's that rich again, maybe richer. Not because someone finally fought the company hard enough, because someone finally understood what was actually being thrown away. If you've ever inherited a problem nobody else in your family had the strength left to solve, share this with the person who's quietly carrying that same weight right now. Sometimes the inheritance isn't land or money. It's the unfinished work. And somebody always has to be the one who finishes it.